Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Andrew Missick. In this program, I want to talk about something very important, and it's about the martyrs of Syria.
Jesus was an Aramaic-speaking Jew of the Middle East, and the Assyrians are Aramaic-speaking Christians in the Middle East who have endured persecution for over 1,000 years. Join Voice of the Word Aramaic Bible teacher, artist, and author Stephen Missick as he examines the Bible through the ancient languages, peoples, lands, cultures, and times in which it was first revealed. Research the Scriptures, rescue persecuted Christians, and restore the Church to its Semitic roots. And now, Voice of the Word.
Just this past Sunday, during religious services in a Greek Orthodox church, now in Arabic they call it Roman Orthodox. This is the Melkite church. Melkite is a word derived from the Arabic word for king, because this was they had different sects and denominations throughout the Middle East. But the Greek Orthodox Church was the church of the king, or the Caesar, the emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, which we call, for some odd reason, the Byzantine Empire. The capital of the Eastern Roman Empire was Constantinople. I think the Western tradition is to delegitimize the East. So instead of calling it Constantinople or the Eastern Roman Empire, we call it Byzantium. And Byzantium is what the little town of the town of Byzantium that Constantinople was built over, right? It's the original name of Constantinople. Constantinople. Of course, today Constantinople is Istanbul. So in the Middle East, there's a lot of Arab Christians who are Greek or Roman or Melkite Orthodox. So I've been to Syria several times over the decades. The first time I went was in 2001. I was actually in Syria on September 11th. I graduated from college, and I wanted to go and just do what I wanted to do. I wanted to go and visit Aramaic-speaking villages in the Middle East. You have Malula outside of Damascus, and at that time you had several Assyrian Christian villages outside of Hasaki in eastern Syria. And of course, September 11th happened, and I've been to Syria a couple of times since then, and I've also been the neighboring country, Lebanon, several times. And I love Syria, I love Lebanon. But you had this dictatorship, the Alawite, or the Assad dynasty, and they presented themselves as being against radical Islam, as secular and moderate. And they weren't entirely, and of course it was dictatorship. And you can when you live there and you see how a police state works, it's disturbing. So, I want stability and peace for Syria, but honestly, after I saw how the regime worked over there, I wasn't a big fan of the Alawite regimes. The Alawites are it's a religious group in Syria. Under the Assads, they affiliated themselves with the Shia branch of Islam, but really they're probably not truly Muslims at all. They believe in, my understanding is they believe that Ali is God incarnate, and they believe in reincarnation and a lot of other strange things. Very similar to us, very similar to the Druze. Also, it's an ethno-religion, so you don't really know about the religion until you're like 30 years old and you're initiated in it. So it's an ethnicity. And it used to be about 10%, Syria was 10% Alawite. And I think an Air Force colonel took over the government. That was Hafez Assad. And then he had his son. Basil was the heir apparent, but it ended up being Bashir Assad and he was the last of this dynasty. And he had to flee the country. And right now, unfortunately, the new president was an ISIS fighter, is now the president of Syria. And the Alawites, like I said, I'm not a big fan of the Alawites. They're bad. But these people are far worse. And we should be concerned. And I want to talk about some martyrs. Now, back in 2015, and this is the thing about the call of martyrdom. We read these stories, like in Eusebius and the Church Fathers, about early Christians dying for their faith, going to the Colosseums, being fed to the lions. And actually, more Christians died for their faith in the 20th century than probably throughout all of history, from the times of the apostles until now. So in Egypt, the thing about some of these martyrs is these aren't bold preachers. Like, people are afraid to Like with Islam, if you leave Islam, Sharia law dictates that you're to be executed for leaving Islam. And this is for, I mean, if you're born and raised in the faith, it's not a matter of personal choice. If you're a Muslim, you're not allowed on pain of death to leave the religion. And I mean, to preach the gospel to Muslims or to attempt to convert someone, you could die, or just debating or dialoguing with Muslims could end up in, because you blaspheme the Prophet Muhammad, you could be put to death. So it's not, you think like a martyr, you think somebody's taking a bold stand to preach the gospel, or they're coerced to deny their faith and they refuse. But you think of the martyrs as somebody of exceptional moral courage, right? To put their life on the line for Jesus, and something to be greatly admired. And I mean, a lot of people are afraid of even being thought less of for being religious, right? You know, people compromise their Christian stances all the time. So, let's think about martyrdom recently. So back in 2015, you had some Coptic Christians who went to Libya to work, to do some labor to support their families back home in Egypt. And they were captured by ISIS, and 21 of these men were taken to the beach and they were decapitated. And, you know, these people weren't like, I'm going to die for the Lord. I'm going to be, it wasn't their ambition to, you know, be overtly religious, to preach the gospel or anything. I mean, but they were captured and refused to deny their faith and die for the Lord nonetheless. Just common people. And see, that's the appeal, I think, of the 12 apostles. The stories that read in the Bible about them, is you realize that Jesus chose not people of exceptional skills or talents, but common people like you and me. And these just laborers, just people who are trying to work to support their family. I mean, they're Christians, Coptic Christians, but, you know, not particularly devout or religious. I'm sure that they're sincere in their faith, and yet they were called upon to give their faith, to give their life for the Lord. And now people, they're honored as martyrs. There's a movie made, an animated film made about them recently. And there's icons of them. It's just, imagine just people going about their daily life, and then they won the crown of martyrdom. So this Sunday in Syria, I was talking to a friend over there. She says that 300 people were in church, and then there was a killing in the church. And I thought it was 19 people. I guess the numbers went out. When it was reported, I saw 19, but it looks like 25 people died. So I want to read about this from the Gateway Pundit. And let's take a look at what happened. So you go to church. This is, like I said, you don't know who's going to win the crown of martyrdom. These were just people going about their daily lives. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to take Mass, right? They go to church, and yet they end up dying for Jesus Christ. So this is from the Gateway Pundit, and our news media in the United States of America is so corrupt. It's disgusting. And I mean, we need reform. We need alternate media. Even Fox, I'm conservative, but it's corrupt. Why can't we just have truth tellers and just straight up news? And you just can't trust anybody. Well, part of it is people need to be independent and critical thinkers. But that's a very difficult skill. And not that many people have it. That's why we should hold these people up to high levels of, we should hold them up to be, you have to display integrity to be in the news media. This is a sacred trust, because unfortunately, not everybody's smart or has critical thinking skills. So that means that you could use disinformation to manipulate and deceive people. And one of the things I want to talk about, a Coptic Christian that I greatly admire. This is Raymond Ibrahim. I follow his work. He's got a new YouTube channel. He's written several books. And he wrote a book called Crucified Again. Because you had a moderate, this was Mubarak, Hosni Mubarak. And I was frustrated with Mubarak. I've been to Egypt several times as well. Because Mubarak was hesitant about cracking down on radical Muslims. And under Sisi, I haven't heard a lot of, he does a lot better job than Mubarak. But under Mubarak, you'd have probably 2 or 3 attacks per year, violent attacks on churches. And what would happen is Muslims, usually you have a security guard, a Muslim security guard outside the church. So what happens is a group of terrorists, jihadists, Salafi Muslims, whatever you want to call them. They kill the Muslim guard. They go into the church with a machine gun and just start spraying, mowing the church down. Happens too often in Egypt. And what happens is, if there's three people mow the church down with machine gun fire, they're released under Mubarak. They're just released. The only person who is in any trouble is the person who killed the Muslim. Because under Sharia law, you have this Ummah, right? The Ummah is the Muslim nation, the nation of Islam. And if you're not a Muslim, you can't be part of the Muslim Ummah, right? You're an outsider. And in a way, say a second-class citizen, you're not even a citizen at all. In a true Muslim state, you're actually even dehumanized. You're a lesser human because you haven't said the Shahada. You don't believe in Islam. So that's the way Mubarak would roll, right? Only the person who killed a Muslim would be in serious trouble. The other people, 2 weeks in jail, even though they killed 30, 40 people. So I was very frustrated with that. But then they had Morsi came to power, and Morsi, he was destroying Egypt. And I went to a rally when he was in office, and Coptic Christians believe that he wasn't really elected. I don't know about that, but I know he was ruining Egypt. So it was so bad. Egypt depends on foreign tourists to come in their country. And when you have Sharia law, when you're like I was complaining about Mubarak not punishing Muslims who persecute and kill Christians. But under Morsi, they actually had tanks in the street attacking, rolling over Christians, with military vehicles running them over in the street. So under Morsi, the government itself, instead of just Muslim extremists carrying out these attacks, under Morsi, the state, the Islamic State of Egypt, which it's got a 10% Christian minority, so it's not a strict Muslim state, but nonetheless under Morsi it was. So if people look on the news and they see tanks running over peaceful Christians in the street, instead of going to see the pyramids, they're going to go see the French Riviera. They're going to go see the Mayan pyramids instead of the Egyptian pyramids, right? They're going to make other plans. They're going to cancel their trip to Egypt, and they're going to go, instead of seeing the pyramids, they're going to go see the Great Wall of China or something like that, right? Or go see the Sydney Opera House. So tourism dried up, and the economy collapsed, and there's a revolt, and General Sisi took over, and he's better. I'm not saying he's the best, but really, I haven't heard. I keep track of these things in Egypt, and it's not a normal occurrence to have an attack like that in Egypt under Sisi. So he's more serious about protecting the Christian minority than Mubarak was. But Rehman Ibrahim wrote this book called Crucified Again, and in this book, he talks about how the media is not going to report on this story. He explains why. It's like, well, why would you not report on a story like this? They don't want the public to know. It's like, well, why would they want to keep because they think that this will just play into Islamophobia. The way they look at it is Muslims are an aggrieved people. They're a victim of the West, right? That's the narrative. They have this narrative that well, of course you have terrorism. We provoked them. It's our fault. We've induced them. We coerced them into doing this. That's why we have terrorism. It's our fault. Or it's not their fault. And also, it's the self-loathing liberal and whoever's against the West and against Christianity, as the liberals are good. So if Muslims are persecutors, right, against a Christian minority, that we call the whole narrative, because the left is about the narrative, Marxist narratives. And if they report on persecution of Christians, that questions the narrative. And people might start thinking for themselves and question all these assumptions they have about the nature of Islam. So, like I said, I lived in Syria, and I'm concerned about this. So Gateway Pundit, this is Antonio Graceffo. He says they should have been called Martyrs, Syria's church bombing and the government's possible involvement. I'm going to call them martyrs, right? They just went to church to worship, to take communion, to listen to the preaching of the word from an Orthodox perspective. But it's biblical, it's Christian. You can argue about our sectarian differences all we want, but that's the fact. These are professed Christians going to service to listen to the preaching, the reading of the word, preaching of the gospel, and to recite the historic creeds, the Nicene Creed. This year is the anniversary of the Nicene Creed, by the way. And because it's 325, now it's 2025, so it's an important anniversary. And just to worship Jesus Christ, our Lord, and the Holy Trinity. And then they're killed. So, like I said, these people, just like the 21 copts, they didn't intend to be martyrs. They went to Libya to work, and not to seek out martyrdom. And during the Roman persecutions, some church fathers criticized people who sought out martyrdom. Right? It says if you're called to give up your life, to sacrifice your life for Christ, they didn't like people who wanted to be martyred. It's like, martyr me, please, please, please. It's like, no, that's not what we should do. If they coerce you to deny the Lord and you refuse and you're martyred, then you're a valid martyr, but don't go chasing after it. But these people weren't chasing after it, right? They're just trying to worship the Lord. They're trying to go to work in Libya, and to worship the Lord in this church in Damascus. And they're killed. Why were they killed? For their faith. They're martyrs. They are martyrs. And even if they're not called martyrs, I'm going to call them martyrs because they were. In the Catholic Church, and like I said, I'm evangelical Protestant. But, there's things in the Catholic Church as a Protestant I don't agree with. But what's true is true. The Catholic Church teaches that if you give your life for the Lord, if you're martyred, you immediately go into heaven. Of course, I believe all people who truly love and believe in the Lord go to heaven. But I guess you have the idea of purgatory. If you actually die for the Lord, you go straight to heaven without having to worry about purgatory. I'm not saying I believe in purgatory, neither do the Orthodox. So I'm going to read this article. We see a picture of a little girl covered with blood. I'll post that. On what should have been a peaceful Sunday morning of worship, 25 Syrian Christians were slaughtered for their faith. As the faithful gathered for divine liturgy at Mar Elias Greek Orthodox Church in Dawila, outside Damascus, on June 22, 2025, at least 3 terrorists shattered the sanctity of the service with bullets and explosives. The main attacker entered the packed church, opened fire on the 350 worshipers. My friend says 300 is 350. And detonated his explosive vest at the entrance as they tried to force him out. Meanwhile, at least one terrorist, I thought it was just one attacker, but it turns out there was more. Meanwhile, at least one terrorist remained outside, firing at the worshipers and into the stained glass windows, while the other attempted to enter and detonate a grenade. So it looks like there's 3 terrorists. That's the way they do it in Egypt. 2 parishioners intervened and managed to wrest the device away before it exploded. Still, the blast tore through the church, destroying pews, shattering glass, and leaving blood-stained icons and scattered bodies in what should have been a sanctuary. People were praying safely under the eyes of God, said Father Fadi Gaddis, who witnessed the carnage that left 25 dead and at least 63 wounded. When you think of 63 wounded, you should think of people with, sometimes it's just glass or scratches, but sometimes these people are seriously disfigured for the rest of their life, lost an arm and leg. So when you hear wounded, it can mean a lot of different things, including being horrifically disfigured for the rest of your life, losing your eyes, having your nose blown off, or your jaw blown off. Among the victims were children, innocent lives taken into placement to offer peace and protection. This attack is the latest in a series of assaults on Christians, but is the first known to be launched inside a church since the Syrian conflict began in 2015 maybe? They got a typo. It says 2001. 2000. I'm not sure exactly when the Syrian civil war started. Under Obama, we need to remember, I vote Republican, but John McCain went to Syria and met with al-Baghdadi and other terrorist leaders to start the so-called Arab Spring, which is actually the Islamist Spring. Notice, McCain also supported the jihadists who were killing Christians in Amboina in Indonesia, and John McCain supported the jihadists in Kosovo and in Bosnia, which we should not have been involved in those conflicts. That's none of our business being involved in the former Yugoslavia. That was a jihad, a holy war that had been raging for hundreds of years. And if we're going to get involved in something like that, we should not be entering the war on the side of Muslims. Notice, look, you had the Orthodox Serbs the Catholic Croats and you had Serbian Bosnians, you had Croatian Bosnians, you had Muslim Bosnians. The media was trying to make it look like the Serbs were fighting against the poor innocent Bosnians. What had happened is Bosnia declared independence, and the Muslims were a majority in certain places, and they're trying to implement a Muslim government. And a large portion of the population is Christian and did not want to live under Sharia law. So they revolted. Would you want to live under Sharia law? If you're in Bosnia and they form a Muslim government, wouldn't you fight too? And yet the United States gets involved to make sure that the Serbs lose? So, back to Syria. So since the Syrian conflict began, it was before 2015, probably more like 2011, marking a disturbing escalation in violence and a grave violation of holy spaces. I should know when the Serbian Civil War began. I just don't have it off the top of my head. It's been 14 years or so. But then it says, but the historical significance was even more damning. You know, I went to Nebek, to the monastery of Mar Musa, and while I was there, I saw, I met with Father Paolo. It's Italian. He's a Franciscan. He went to restart with local Syriac Christians to restart that monastery. And Father Paolo, he studied Arabic. He's a Franciscan, he's a Christian, but he loved Islam for whatever reason. And he'd go and he'd befriend the local imams. And I said, Father Paolo, you should be careful and associate with these radical Muslims. I mean, they'll kill you. He was a good man, and they did kill him, sadly. So, but that was they attacked that monastery, killed Father Paolo. A lot of Christians were killed in Hasaki as well. Places I visited. It's sad. You know, I believe, this is not crazy, it's going to happen, I feel it. God he's bearing his arm. His mighty arm is being stretched out in judgment against the Muslim world. And he's going to smite radical Islam. And Islam will never rise again. The Lord is unsheathing his furious sword, and it's God that's going to do it. And I believe it. And the Assyrian people and the Christians over there, women, you need to have families. You have to make babies so we have a future. But also, you know, the Jewish people, a lot of them, the original Jewish settlers, you know, they went there and they developed the land. Assyrians and just other Christians too. We should go to the Middle East, and Assyrian Christians need to go back and resettle their villages, take back what the enemy has stolen, and reestablish in Assyria. It's going to happen. It seems like when I was a kid, we lived in the shadow of fear of the Soviet Union. It wasn't as bad as the 50s, you know, early. I mean, that way people were really, really afraid back then. But it's still there. You know, the Soviet Union was this big threat, and you know, the Soviet Union collapsed. We thought it never happened, never could happen, but it did. And so you think that God can't judge the Islamic world for their sins and for these atrocities? He will, and he is, and we're going to see it soon. And people, it's hard to believe, but I believe that it's going to happen. I profess it. In a devastating public statement, back to the news story, directed to President al-Shara. In a devastating public statement directed at President al-Shara, Patriarch John X Yazigi, I have a lot of friends in Syria named Yazigi, so I probably know people of that family. The Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Antioch and all the East delivered perhaps the most scathing indictment possible from a religious leader. There has been no attack on a church since 1860, except during your reign. Many Christians on the ground in Syria, speaking honestly, said they believed the government was involved in the attack. A few weeks ago now, there were killings in Syria. At least 200 Christians were killed along the coast, And I want to say, I got this book here. Well, this is my book on the further Acts of the Apostles. But I also have this book about Peter, the lost Acts of Peter. And in this book, Peter evangelizes the coast of Syria, Latakia, which is called Laodicea back then, up to Tartus, which used to be called Antares. So several hundred Christians were killed up there, probably because to purge the enemy, their enemy. So the former regime was Alawite, and there's Christian support of the Alawite. It's just true. Some Christians. So this current regime went in there and killed Alawites and Christians, probably as a way to solidify control. Many Christians on the ground in Syria, speaking anonymously, said they believed that the government was involved in the attack. Shortly afterwards, the regime claimed that security forces raided hideouts used by Islamic State, killing 2 of its members, including one who facilitated the suicide bomber's entry into Mar Elias church. Mar Elias means Saint Elijah. And one of the things I learned when I was in Syria, I went to these places and they're saying, well, Elijah went here. And I thought, I scoffed at it. What do you mean, Elijah in Syria, outside of Damascus? But the Bible says, I was reading the Bible later, and it specifically says that Elijah went to Lebanon. Elijah, it says he ministered and traveled throughout the, the wilderness of Damascus. So Elijah was a prophet, not just to Israel, but to Syria. And that's just something that the Old Testament, the Jews are God's chosen people. But God sent his prophets to all nations. It's always God's vision has been for all the world to be blessed. And perhaps the Jewish people are chosen to play an important role in that. But God's always been concerned for all humanity. He loves the Jewish people, not just the Jewish people, but everybody. So it's important that the Bible teaches, we're reading the Bible the wrong way. It specifically says that Elijah preached in Lebanon and he preached in Syria. He's not just the God of the Jews, he's the God of the Syrians and the Lebanese and the Phoenicians and the God of all mankind. And we got these wrong assumptions. Read the Bible. Let God speak. Let God be true and every man a liar. So the thing about this president was he was ISIS, right? But given the allegations of government involvement, this statement is widely seen as a cover-up. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that one injured attacker was taken to Al-Mujtahid Hospital, where it was discovered he was affiliated with the Syrian Ministry of Defense and originally from the Deir el-Zor governorate. So that means one of the terrorists worked with the Syrian Department of Defense. It's exposed. So recently, Ted Cruz and had an argument with Tucker Carlson. I hate to see this. It's unnecessary. I think that Tucker Carlson was being needlessly rude and confrontational and adversarial. I don't know why. Because if somebody is on our side, I don't see why you want to destroy them or humiliate them or embarrass them or attack them. I don't know what Tucker's problem is. I admired Tucker in the past. Now I'm getting disturbed. And a lot of things that Tucker did in that debate offended me. But that being said, Tucker made a few important points. And one of it was, look at our Middle Eastern involvement. Because of that, ISIS is in control of Syria. So Ted Cruz says, well, maybe let's wait and see. I think we've waited long enough and now we're seeing. You got to think about who this person is. When ISIS was killing Christians and going to Syrian villages I've been to the refugee camps. I went over there to see what's going on for myself. I mean, these people are demon-possessed. I mean, I saw little Assyrian boys' pictures that were shown to him, sent to me, the atrocities ISIS was committing. Kidnapping a little boy and the Christian parents opening the door and seeing their body parts of their beloved child on the threshold of the door the next morning. Of course, they marked the letter N for Nazarene on all the Christian houses in Mosul. All the Christians had to flee. Like I said, I visited them. I saw them. I saw for myself what was going on over there. Putting people in acid, burning people alive, sawing people's heads off. And Dostoevsky talked about this. Because this is something that's happened through the dawn of Islam to today. And I mean, Dostoevsky is saying what the Muslims are doing to the Orthodox Christians. In his time, it was in Bulgaria. It's always somewhere, isn't it? So since the year 632, every 50 to 100 years, this happens. Check it out. And my doctoral thesis is coming out soon. I have a timeline of persecution. You can see it. It's factual. In Egypt, among the Assyrians, every 50, 100 years, sometimes more often, but doesn't fail. Every 50, 100 years, there's massive, what would you call it, pogroms, massacres, mass killings, ethnic cleansing, genocidal campaigns. That's the legacy of Islamic history. So Dostoevsky is saying the same thing, where, it's like even animals don't do these things. And I think that most human beings don't do these things. This is demonic, how they kill these people. So think about this. This president was one of those ISIS members. I read that he was imprisoned in Baghdad. So I was probably guarding that guy while he was detained. Who knows? I probably laid eyes on him when I was doing my deployment. All right. The attack on Mar Elias or St. Elijah Church, or Elijah the Prophet Church, cannot be separated from the broader context of who now rules Syria. The country's de facto governing power, following the ousture of Bashar al-Assad, is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Al-Sham is a way, it means the sun, but it's a way of saying Syria or Damascus. A faction, well, that's like, it means in Damascus, they say Asham or Sham. It means the sun, but it means this. I don't know where it comes from, but that's the word they use for Damascus over there when I lived there. A faction that ultimately traces its origins directly to Al Qaeda, founded in 2011. I think that's about the time the Syrian civil war began. Sorry, I don't have to. That should be right now. It's 2025. I should know that, right? If it was 2015, that's 10 years. This is about a 14-year war. I got a lot of stuff on my mind. Okay, founded in 2011 as Jabhat al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda's official Syrian affiliate. The group was later rebranded as Jabhat Fatah al-Sham in 2016, and then as HTS in 2017 after merging with other Islamist factions. Despite claims of breaking ties with Al-Qaeda, this split is widely viewed as strategic rather than ideological. HTS's leader and current Syrian strongman, Ahmed al-Shara, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, was originally sent to Syria by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to establish the Al-Qaeda branch. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is Trump had him killed, and General Soleimani. Look, I don't gloat over people's death, but I admire Trump for having these men taken out, al-Baghdadi and General Soleimani, because I've seen, working in military hospitals, I've seen how people suffer under, soldiers blown to bits. And of course, the villages I went to and atrocities I've seen. So this man is a lieutenant, according to this article here. Ahmed al-Shara, the president of Syria, was a lieutenant of al-Baghdadi, the so-called caliph of the ISIS caliphate. Al-Shara had previously fought under the infamous Abu Musab al-Zakari, and spent 5 years in Iraqi prison for terrorist activities. Okay, Abu Musab al-Zakari. Al-Zakari, we took him out, but that was when Bush was president, if I remember correctly. And al-Zakari was the one who, he's the one that introduced the, sawing people's heads off, dismemberment, burning, the atrocities, the horrific atrocities, and then filming them, putting them on YouTube. He's the one that started that. He's the initiator. Zakari was the initiator of that. And he was taken out by Bush, not by Trump. The U.S. Department of State continues to offer a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture. And experts reject his claims that HTS is no longer adheres to Salafi jihadist ideology. Some moron, these Muslims just lie, Muslim apologists and Dawa people, the word jihad is not in the Quran. They say, well, the concept is, and related words are different cognate. What would you call them? The words used in different forms, but it's the same word, the same idea. Different conjugations of jihad are found in the Quran, even if the word itself is not. Besides, it's a Muslim concept. There's a lot of things that Muslims believe and are obligated to believe that aren't in the Quran. And these Muslims go around, we don't, in Arabic, terrorism is so foreign to us, we don't have a word for terrorism. What is terrorism? We don't. Salafi Islam, that's the word they use. And Daesh, they do have words, just liars, man. Just these Dawa people are such liars. We shouldn't put up with that. So 5 years in Iraqi prison for terrorist activities. I probably laid eyes on this guy when I was working in Iraqi prison during one of my deployments. The U.S. State Department continues to offer a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture, and experts reject his claims that HTS is no longer adheres to Salafi jihadist ideology. I already said that. Under HTS control, religious minorities have suffered extensive repression. In Idlib, where HTS has ruled for over a decade, Christian communities have all but disappeared. Reports indicate that only 2 elderly Christians remain. Clergy are banned from wearing visible religious clothing in public, and crosses have been stripped down from church buildings. I guess there's this little enclave where they're still implementing Sharia law in Syria. Right. So if this is going on, and the current president of Syria was no longer a jihadist, which is, I don't believe that he would actually be the right-hand man of al-Baghdadi, this is a dangerous person. We just got to deal with the reality. And now he's carrying out mass killings in churches. I mean, I wish this wasn't true. I love Syria. I hate to see this happening. But so if he was a moderate or becoming a moderate like he claims, he's the president, supposedly, of Syria, he would stop this jihad, this Sharia enclave in Syria and relax these restrictions to stop the persecution of Christians in that area. Human rights organizations have documented widespread abuses, including seizure of property belonging to displaced Christians and Druze, as well as forced conversions. The 2023 U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom report found that HTS continues to enforce a hardline Salafi interpretation of Islamic law, disenfranchising Christians, Druze, and other non-Sunni groups. Druze residents were forced to convert to Sunni Islam, yet even after doing so, 20 were massacred by HTS fighters in June 2015. I saw videos, of course, they're targeting Christians, number one, but moderate Muslims, you know, a lot of these people getting crucified are most likely Christians, Alawites, Druze, but some of these people being viciously killed and crucified by ISIS are Muslims, moderate Muslims. This is horrific. So even though they convert, they have this, it's demonic, right? They have this need to see. It's sad watching these people. They're taking people out 15 at a time, lining up and shooting them. And it's just watching the face of these men knowing that they only had moments to live. And there's nothing they can do to quench the bloodlust of these ISIS people. It's demonic. They're demonically possessed. This group also expropriated Christian and Druze properties and attempted to erase their religious identities. These actions reflect not only an assault on Syria's religious diversity, but a persistent ideologically driven campaign of sectarian domination. The Syrian government's response has only deepened Christian outrage. Across the country's believers expressed outrage and anger that President al-Shara failed to properly honor the dead. Even in his message of condolence, he did not ask for mercy on the victims, and most tellingly, he referred to them as killed rather than martyred. This is no accident. Dying for one's faith while in prayer is martyrdom, a sacred death that signifies sainthood and ultimate witness to Christ. By deliberately avoiding the term or the word martyr, the government not only diminished the spiritual significance of their deaths, but signaled a deeper disregard for religious identity and freedom. The most damning critique came from Patriarch John X, Yazigi, his name is Yazigi, the spiritual leader of the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Antioch and all of the East. Speaking at the funeral, he revealed that no one from the government visited the site of the bombing except for the Christian minister, likely Hind Kabawat, the sole Christian in the administration. For many, this token present symbolized the regime's neglect of Syria's Christian community. and perhaps his most powerful statement, the patriarch addressed President al-Shara directly. You give birth to 10 to 20 children. We give birth to 1 or 2. And some of these children were martyred yesterday in the bombing. What can I say to our families now? Like I said earlier, Christian, Middle Eastern, Syrian Christian men have families. We got to do it. Got to have bigger families. To have 3 or 4 children, not just 1 or 2. And it's not true that some Muslims do have large families, not all of them. Their demographic rates are in a steep decline too. That idea that every single Muslim male has like 4 wives and has 20 children per wife, it's not true. They have population decline too, and they're also been waiting on delaying marriage. So their population is also declining, not as fast as Christians, but it's still happening nonetheless. His words captured not only the grief of the moment, but the demographic crisis facing Syria's ancient Christian population. Each life lost is a personal tragedy, but it's also the erosion of a dwindling community, whereby every death carries immeasurable weight. They should have been martyrs, and now there's growing fears that they won't be the last. That's what I'm concerned about. So, this means that we should view this new president of Syria as a jihadist. And you need to put diplomatic pressure on this guy. So, like I said, I believe in Jesus Christ. He's the way, the truth, the life. And God is a God of justice, and soon justice is going to be executed by His mighty divine arm against these evildoers. So, let's pray for the Christians of Syria. And like I said, I can't put a time frame on it, but I think within the next 5 to 10 years, it's already happening. In the United States, 1 out of every 4 Muslims here leaves Islam. In Syria, they've done polls, and they found that now you have spiritual but not religious, secular, agnostic, Christian. In anonymous polling, Iran's, they're having to close down mosques because people aren't going anymore. Islam is, through ISIS and through the mullahs, Islam has been discredited in the eyes of many people who are raised Muslim over there, or Islamic. And the other thing is, now you have apologetics, and it used to be that, like in Saudi Arabia, if you have a Bible, you took a Bible into Saudi Arabia, they could potentially kill you. But now with the new information age, you can't keep the gospel witness out, and they can no longer prevent people questioning Islam. And people are asking questions. And I saw this video where it's David Wood, and he had a guest on there, and he's explaining these new trends. And David Wood's guest said, we're reading about these people who were persecuted because they wouldn't worship the Babylonian god Bel. And he goes, I don't know who the god Bel is. I have to look it up, in a dictionary or, online. What's the god Bel? Bel is Marduk, or Murdoch. That's where the name comes from. He was the chief god of Babylonia. It's called Bel, which is the equivalent of Baal and means Lord, right? He was a lesser god that triumphed over the elder gods and became the chief god through his strength and prowess, and he is instrumental in he became the chief god, right? Murdoch, or Bel. And there's stories of Daniel and Bel and the dragon. It's mentioned in the scriptures, but it's so obscure now. And this guest of David Wood is saying, the day is coming where, if the Lord tarries, that people are going to have to look in a dictionary or go online and who is Muhammad? What is Islam? That this will be going to the dustbin of history the way Bel Marduk has. And I think that's happening. And Muslims themselves have seen an avalanche of apostasy. So when this happens, we need to be ready. And we're going to force the devil to give back everything that he's stolen from us. We're going back to the Assyrian homeland, and we're going to rebuild. Just like these, you can love it, you can hate it, but you had these Jews, I guess in the early 1900s that went to Israel to settle the land and develop that country. And if these Jewish Zionists can do it, if they can go back to a home that they had been exiled from 2,000 years ago, how come Assyrian Christians can't go back to homes and reestablish themselves in their ancient homeland they were exiled from 5, 10 to 15 years ago? We can, and we will. There will be a rebirth of the Assyrian Christian heritage. It's not going away. And heaven and earth will pass. Jesus said this. Jesus said, heaven and earth will pass away, but my word, and the Assyrians still speak the language of Jesus. They speak his word. And they proclaim the gospel. His word will not pass away. And the scripture says that God's word will not return unto him or unto us void. The word of God has power. And, you know, Tertullian, it's a great church father. He's kind of a early Protestant, early evangelical, so I kind of like him. He's in Carthage in North Africa. He said something that I kind of take issue with. Tertullian said that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. And I was saying, well, maybe in the Roman Empire that was true, but long sustained persecution of Christians in certain places has led to the extinction of Christianity. Take North Africa. Outside of Coptic Egypt, there's hardly any Christians left. Wiped out by long sustained persecutions. The Assyrian church had Christians from Baghdad all the way to Beijing. Most of those churches are gone. Why? Because of devastating, horrific, long sustained persecution. So sometimes it works. But there's a God in heaven, and he gets the final word. And there's going to be a day of reckoning. It's coming. And we need to be prepared to move when God's Spirit does and play a part in God reestablishing himself in this ancient land. It's happening. But maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. You don't have to agree with me. But we need to acknowledge the martyrs. Now, this dictator of Syria, this terrorist leader, he says that, won't even allow them to be called martyrs, but they are martyrs nonetheless. And we need to acknowledge and honor our martyrs and remember the martyrs of Syria.
Research, rescue, and restore. Help Voice of the Word and Aramaic Christian Ministries mission research the ancient languages, peoples, lands, cultures, and times of the Bible. Rescue persecuted Assyrian Christians in the Middle East and restore Christianity to its original Semitic roots. For Stephen Missick's books, online giving, and other resources from Aramaic Christian Ministries, visit www.stephenmissick.com. Join us next time on Voice of the Word as we research the Scriptures, rescue persecuted Christians, and restore the church to its Semitic roots.